Well, good morning to all of you. Welcome. Great to see you all this morning. I know we've got an audience online right now. Welcome to you as well. Maybe you're just checking us out. Maybe it's your first time here. You need to know we're in the second week of really what we started a brand new series last week called Our Game Plan. As a church, we actually have a game plan. And so we're talking about that over this series of weeks, kind of giving you an insider's look behind the vision and kind of the planning curtain, letting you know the what's and the whys of the strategy behind Fearless Church. But the reason we're doing that, the reason we want you to know why we do what we do is because our hope for you, every one of you, no matter where you stand with God today, our hope is that you would take conscious steps forward in your faith. Ultimately, we want all of you to become fearless followers of Jesus who change the world. And we want to tell you a little bit about our heart behind that and what we're doing. Last week, we talked about the first part of our game plan. We said our hope for all of you is that you would be challenged. When you walk into our campus here, we want you to be challenged each and every week. In other words, we want you to be inspired. We want you to be motivated, at times even uncomfortably motivated, pressed and pushed forward. It can be very easy to become complacent in any area of life, including our faith. And so our hope is that in a rightful way, we would challenge you and inspire you to take steps forward. Now, it is my belief that sometimes it feels good to be challenged. It really does, doesn't it? Do you like that feeling of inspiration? Do you like that moment when you are compelled to do something and you've got that intention in your heart? I call that the want to. How many of you like having a want to? Yeah. That's why we're going to lean into the second part of our game plan today, because while it's important to remember we have some want to, how many of you know that sometimes there's a difference between the want to and the will do areas of life, right? Want to doesn't always translate into will do. Sometimes inspiration doesn't always lead to action. Sometimes wanting to change is not actually the same thing as changing. I'll say it this way, there's a gap. There's a gap at times between the things we would want to do and the things we actually will do. And some of you know the difference. Some of you have been inspired at some point in your life and you said, man, yes, this is the day. This is the day. And maybe you felt that moment of deflation, right? Defeat, maybe even disappointment when you came to the realization that thing you set out to do, you didn't actually do. And let's be honest, if you looked in the mirror, you realized, I'm not ever going to do that. And we keep reminders around us just for those moments, right? The exercise bike in the basement. It's in mint condition. It's got 1.6 miles logged on it in its lifetime. We've got closets full of workout clothes we don't sweat in. We have shoes we don't run in. You have a lot of yoga pants you've never yogaed in. You buy the full-size piano, put it right in the living room, and it gathers dust and takes up space, right? Some of you went out and you've got the chopper, the shredder, the blender, the dehydrator, the air fryer. You don't actually cook or bake anything at this point. You're still unpacking the boxes from your move 6 years ago. You're remodeling the basement for the last decade, right? We have journals we don't write in. I've got stacks of books that I have not yet read, and honestly, I am never going to read. I'm never going to read. We keep these reminders. They're reminders of good intentions, inspired moments, but really what they are is recognitions of false starts. Things we set out to do that kind of fell by the wayside. And there's this gap. There's this gap right here. It looks like a thin line, but it's not. There's a gap between the things we want to do sometimes and the things we actually do. And we argue this away. I do. I rationalize this all the time. Listen, if you don't lose the last 5 pounds, right, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If you don't unpack the things from the garage, you probably never miss what you don't have. You can live with an unfinished basement. And listen, yoga pants, super comfortable. Just wear them all the time. They're like the new jeans today, right? No one cares. But yet there are areas of life, and you know this, there are areas of life where the gap matters more. Some of you are dealing with relationships right now, and you have a gap between the things you want to do and the things you're actually doing, and that gap is creating a problem. It could be a gap in a friendship or a partnership or a marriage. Some of you are parents, and you're watching your kids grow up quickly, and you realize you had some good intentions as a parent, as a mom, or as a dad, as a stepmom, as a stepdad, and you know what? Some of those intentions have not translated into action, and you realize time is slipping by, and the gap between the want-tos and the will-dos of parenting, it's just, you've got to solve that. Some of you have got to move forward in your finances. You can't false start there anymore, or you're going to be underwater. Some of you know that God is calling you to some things in your spiritual journey. God may be prompting you to take some faith steps. In moments like that, you don't want those to become good intentions that fall by the wayside. There are areas of life, I think everybody has them, where we know and we want to close the gap. So the question we're going to answer is, how do we take steps forward when it comes to making some real change in life? How do we go from inspiration to action, taking motivation and actually creating movement, starting to go from the want-tos that we have and find ourselves in a place of actual doing? And all of this prompts us to lean in today. Last week we talked about the first part of our game plan, which was to be challenged, to be inspired. Today we're talking about what it means to be trained. Be trained. That is the second part of our game plan here at Fearless. We want you to be trained. It is a critical part of what we do because we think this may be the area that helps you take the very steps forward that God is having you take. And today we're going to look at something very important that the Apostle Paul said to the church that met in Corinth. And maybe you know nothing about the Bible. There was this guy named Paul, and Paul was very much against God, but he had a life-changing moment, and Paul came to know who God was, and God actually in turn used him to write so much of what we hold in our hands today, what we consider the New Testament of our Bible. And Paul wrote letters to churches, and he wrote 2 letters to this church that met in the city of Corinth, 1st and 2nd Corinthians. And Paul spent about a year and a half there. And Corinth was a fine city. It was a cosmopolitan city. It was in Greece. And one of the things that attracted people to Corinth was that it was kind of a sports town. In fact, every 3 years, Corinth hosted an athletic games called the Isthmian Games. Think of it kind of like the Olympics. That's what they did. And so the best athletes in the empire would gather in Corinth. Well, the Apostle Paul knew this. And so as he wrote to the church in Corinth, he used sports as a picture and as a metaphor to tell them something important about this idea of what it is to be trained. Paul uses a word picture of physical training to say something to us about spiritual growth. He says, do you not know that in a race, all the runners run? But he says only one gets the prize. Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, Paul says, I do not run like someone running aimlessly, and I don't fight like a boxer beating the air. He borrows a word picture, a familiar illustration from the world of athletics to say something important. When it comes to reaching a goal, when it comes to reaching any goal, taking ground, advancing in some way of life, the approach that we take matters. Our approach to change actually matters. He says, do you not know in a race all the runners run, only one gets the prize? Run in such a way, he says. Run in such a way. The implication here is that there are actually different ways to run. There are different ways we can approach the races of our life. That is true for us. No matter what we try to tackle, no matter what we set up to, our attitude and our approach says different things. The question is, what is your approach? What is your approach when it comes to making change in your life? Now, I've got an approach, and I'm going to run it by you and see if it's familiar to you. I think this is the common approach that most people take anytime they attempt to make a change. It boils down to one word. It's this word right here. Try. I think you and I are very, very good at trying to do things. When we get inspired and we get motivated, we want to take a step forward. The go-to strategy we often employ is try. We try to do things, right? And if you want to make a change, start by trying. If you start trying and it doesn't work, what do? Try again, right? We know, right? If at first you don't succeed, you try, then you try again. And then we tell our kids, and if you're trying and it's not working, we simply say, try harder, right? As though somehow apparently the effort level of trying is the indicator, right? Just try harder. It's a natural, instinctive go-to plan, but Paul says, and Paul is suggesting, that there is a better option when it comes to making real change in your life. If you want to move forward, run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games, he says, goes into strict training. He's really saying here, mimic an athlete in this sense. Mimic an athlete in this sense. Instead of trying, I'd recommend you start training. If you really want to make change in your life, he would say, start training. Now, as it's originally written, as he says that, strict training, it actually means agony. agonizing over something. And for those of you who may not be athletes and you look at training, you're like, yes, that's exactly right. Agony and agonizing, and yet we know athletes who will literally agonize over something in pursuit of a dream. They will train, they will prepare, they will give attention to something for months, years, to reach a singular goal. And he says everybody who competes in the games goes into strict training. That's the principle. If you really want to get somewhere, sometimes you have to do less trying and more training. Sometimes it's less trying and more training. There's a difference between the two of these, and it often leads to different results. I was in my last year of college, and I had a roommate. His name was Billy, and I've shared this with some of you before. Billy, my roommate, was kind of a competitive long-distance runner, and he was so impressive week by week. I would just watch him. He would spend, I don't even know, countless hours a week running, but it wasn't even just the running. It was the strength training. It was the mobility, and he would go out early in the morning in pitch black. We lived up in Minnesota. We were in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area. He would go out pitch black, middle of winter, minus 10 degrees. He would work up a sweat and come back. He would have kind of ice and icicles on his face, in his beard, and he would have this chart on the wall, and he would vary his runs. He'd be like, this is a speed run, this is a hill run, right? This is a certain type of a distance run. Then on top of that, of course, he would eat these healthy, high-energy meals, and he would have all these certain snacks that fuel up his body. And so we graduated, and Billy kind of went his direction, I went mine. But a few years after I graduated, I was actually asked to participate in the Twin Cities Marathon. Just happened to be the race that Billy was going to be running, and I found that out. And so for some reason, when I was invited or coerced into running this marathon, I thought to myself, well, that sounds reasonable. Like, how far is that really? I mean, you see the sticker on people's cars, 26.2 miles, that's not bad, right? Now, the realization, though, is that I'm not a runner. I'm more of a jogger. Got any joggers in the room? Yeah, joggers like me, right? We listen to headphones when we run. We go outside only when the weather is nice. I have never once seen the sunrise while I'm jogging, right? I have one speed, not very fast. I've got one distance, not that far. It works together. Here's the good news, though. If you ever want to take up jogging, you can eat whatever you want. You can continue to eat things that are rolled, in batter and deep fried in oil. And so that's what I did. And I signed up, though, and I ran the race. I did run the race. And Paul says, run in such a way as to win the prize. Well, Billy ran the race. He ran the Twin Cities Marathon, and he ran in such a way that he qualified to go run in the prestigious Boston Marathon. Yeah. I ran the race in such a way as to qualify for some first aid and a participation t-shirt. It was the same race. Very different results. Why? There's a big difference when you set your mind to training and when you set your mind to trying. Billy was clearly training. I was, to the best of my ability at that moment, trying in every way I could. Listen, we would do well to remember that when we really want to accomplish what we want to accomplish, training takes things up a notch, and we need to move forward beyond just our good intentions. I think Paul would start by saying this: if you want to train, training involves intentionality. It does. It moves past good intentions to some form of intentionality, and I realize that's a bit ambiguous, but it involves some measure of purpose. It's about setting your mind and purposeful action to make progress. Paul says, don't you know in a race all the runners run, only one gets the prize. Run in such a way as to get the prize. In other words, take a very intentional approach. He says, therefore, he said, I do not run like someone running aimlessly. That word aimless, the idea of I don't run haphazardly. I don't just run randomly. There is a set course, a set direction, some kind of purpose behind that. He goes on to say, I don't fight like a boxer beating the air. I don't know if any of you are in the room are boxers. I do know this. You get tired fast when you box. And the only reason that you would throw a punch in boxing is to what? Hit someone else. And the more you swing and the more you miss, the more you get tired without actually accomplishing your goal. So don't walk in the ring and start swinging wildly. The idea here is athletes. They operate with focus, purpose, direction. It often is what sets apart their training process from the rest of us. But very much and very closely connected to this idea of intentionality is another thing that's important to recognize, that training involves a plan of action. This idea of intentionality, this idea of purpose is connected to this idea right here too. If you really want to train for something, you need some kind of a plan of action. In other words, you need to add structure to the change process. And I don't want you to miss this. I don't want you to miss this because I really do believe that having a plan, having some kind of structure is often the difference between what I'll call a fast start and actually hoping to reach a finish line. It is the critical component that often, for many people, is what closes the gap between just having a want to and the actual will do. And the reason this principle is so important is this, because change in life, and we know this to be true, change in life takes time. The changes we want in life are not instantaneous, right? They don't come in a moment. Changes that you have made in life that are successful take time. They're part of a greater process. If you're an athlete, you certainly know this. You don't wake up one day and become a great athlete. You practice. You start with fundamentals. You repeat it over and over, game after game, year after year. If you're a musician, you know this. If you don't just pick up an instrument, you just don't start singing and have incredible vocal quality. It is practice. It is repetition. It is movement, one step to the next. We do it in school. You build year after year in whatever academic study you're in. It compounds over time. All of our relationships are built this way. You don't build your best relationships in your life apart from one conversation that becomes another conversation, and it's another interaction, and it's another experience. They build one on top of the other. It's the result of a process. It's true in all of these areas of life. It doesn't happen in a moment, which is why having a plan, I think, is so important. Because over the course of time, anytime you set out to do something and you realize you're in a long process, it's easy to kind of go wayward. It's easy to start a certain direction, then you move off to the side and you realize, oh, I think I've lost my way. And when you lose your way, what happens? You either get frustrated or you fold it up and you're like, I think I'm done here. And so you lose track. And so having a plan, having some kind of structure is that guidance that keeps you stepping forward, that keeps pointing you at the goal so you know where it is you're going. More than that, having a plan, having structure actually becomes sort of a form of accountability to help you get where you're going. Anytime you want to make a change, and some of you experience this too, you need a couple things. Sometimes you need discipline, and sometimes you need willpower. Funny thing about discipline and willpower, they go away. They wear off. And many people start with great gusto. I've done this. You start with great gusto and you think, my willpower is going to carry me. But at a moment when your willpower fades, it's so important to be able to turn and lean back to structure, some kind of a plan where you can say, man, I don't have it in me today, but you know what? This says this, or I said I would do that, or I told them I would be there at this time. Having the structure is the thing that holds you and tethers you to the things you really want to do. Training is about building some measure of purpose and intentionality, and it's helped building a life around that, some structure and some plans. And Paul would say, listen, those are principles of training that too often we maybe don't apply to our spiritual lives. And we can. We can employ them in our faith. He says, hey, they do it to get a crown. Who's the they? Athletes. He's talking about athletes. Athletes do what? They train to get a crown that will not last. In other words, it is a temporary goal, a temporary achievement. He says, but we can do it. We can spiritually train to get a crown that will last forever. Spiritual training matters. It has value. He says these exact same words to his young leader, Timothy. He's got a guy named Timothy that he's mentoring, and he says those same words. He says, train yourself to be godly. Train yourself to be godly. He says, physical training is of some value. It has value. Right? But godliness, that has value for all things. Why? Because it holds promise for the present life, here and now, but also for the life to come. It is lasting. Listen, if we're willing to agonize and train and invest in so many things in life that are temporary and that are physical, how can we not employ those principles? How can we not employ that purpose and intention to things that are so much longer lasting and so much greater? There's incredible value in what it is to be trained. Incredible value in this idea right here of being trained. It's important to be challenged. We need to challenge each other. We need to encourage one another. We need to motivate one another. We need to inspire one another. But we also need to help each other get from the want-tos to the will-dos. And that's why it's part of our game plan. here at Fearless Church. That's the peek behind the curtain. Why do we care about training? Because we want you to be able to take steps forward in your faith. Listen, we want to come alongside you. We want to help you do two things. We want to help you be more intentional, more purposeful about your spiritual growth. And on top of that, we actually want to help you provide some plans, some structure, some moments where we can give you direction and accountability to take the steps you say you want to take. And so we build these arenas. We build arenas where you can practice and you can build habits and you can meet with other people that will press you forward in areas of life. And so for our time, as we remain today, just a few more minutes, what I'm going to do is actually just give you a very practical, behind-the-scenes look at how we build our Be-Trained environments. Our Be-Trained events, our Be-Trained environments. I want you to know not only why we build them, but what we're building. How can you participate? And we have Be-Trained events and we have Be-Trained environments. And the difference between those two is quite simply duration. If it's an event, that simply means it's kind of a one-off. It might be a training event seminar. It might just be a couple hours long. It might be an overnight like a retreat, or it might be a few days like a conference. But when we talk about training environments, we're talking about those things that may extend a series of weeks, sometimes months, even approaching, in some cases, almost a year. And so we provide you these events and environments. And each of our events and environments have some things in common. First of all, typically they're specialized. They're specialized. And what that means is we build them based on maybe a certain person or a certain subject matter. So for example, we'll build training environments for men. We'll build certain training environments that are just for women, maybe for parents, maybe for singles, maybe for couples, different people, groups around different subjects. Sometimes it is spiritual growth. Sometimes it's finances. Sometimes it's things, again, related to parenting. All of these different areas of life that we need to grow in. And so if you see a training event, there's a high likelihood it's not for everyone, although we have some of those. Many times it is specialized, certain subject, certain people. Second thing, our events and environments, they're seasonal. They're seasonal. What does that mean? That means they're offered at different times throughout the year, but they're not all offered all the time. And so what we don't have is just a set course of training events and environments that are running constantly all the time. No, they jump on and off of the calendar. And you may notice, if you're around Fearless at any amount of time at all, you may notice that we regularly run events. And so in different seasons, summer, fall, winter, we have events that hit the calendar. But then we also have our environments. And our environments tend to run on the semester model. So many of you are familiar with that, obviously with the school year and this and that. And so as we kick off a new semester this fall in school, we're actually kicking off our fall semester here at Fearless. And so what that means is every August or early September, we launch different environments, and they will run anywhere from September all the way out to about Christmas. And so that is our fall semester. Then we turn the corner around Christmas and we start our winter semester. So January, February, we'll kick off a new set of training environments, and those environments will run us probably out into May, near the end of the school year. And then we have summer, where we generally take a break from environments, and yet we'll have events that are on the calendar. Does that make sense? So they're seasonal. That being said, all of our training events and training environments, they always have a start time and an end time. So if you jump into one of our training events, there's a start and an end. And so what that means for you is, hey, I don't have to sign up to this and be it forever. This may be something that for me right now is a need, and so I put it on my calendar. And if it's not the right season for you to put it on your calendar, that's okay, because it'll circle back around at some point. I'll put it on my calendar. But it is not a way of life. It's something you jump into and you jump out of. Last week, we talked about this Be Challenged environment that we're sitting in right now. And we said, hey, when it comes to our worship services and coming here and being challenged, being motivated, being inspired, we want you here as much as you can be here. This is not a start and an end. If you're doing this Sunday after Sunday, week after week to be encouraged, we want that for you. Have it always on your calendar. When we talk about community around here and connecting with other people in a significant way, we want that to always be on your calendar. But these types of events, they're seasonal. There may be moments for you where it's the right thing for you as an individual, it's the right thing for you as a family, and then there are other moments where it's not. And you'll understand our heartbeat behind that. We're not always trying to build bigger numbers around all of our training events and environments. They're specialized and specific for people at specific times. And the third piece, and maybe the most important piece, is that all of our events and all of our environments, we would call them strategic. Strategic, meaning they don't serve all purposes, but they do serve a couple of purposes. And the purposes around our training events and environments are twofold. One, we want you to develop understanding. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But more than that, we really do want you to grow and deepen in relationships. So if you come to a training event or a training environment, our heart is to give you some content, certainly. Because you've come for a certain subject for a certain reason, and so we're going to give you some content. We'll give you some knowledge. We'll give you some information, but it's never about the content and the knowledge and the information. It really is about helping you develop understanding. We talked about this last week, because understanding is what takes content and moves it to action. It's not about just filling your head with more detail. It is about putting you into place to apply what it is you're learning. So any training event and environment, it is about understanding that would lead to application. But more than that, we put you alongside other people because we want you to start building relationships. Again, in this room, the Be Challenged environment, it's pretty obvious. You're sitting in rows. You're all sitting in rows and you're staring up in one direction. But when you get into a training event or a training environment, you're not in rows. You're typically in circles. You're around smaller groups of people and you're starting that relational context to get to know other people. We say it all the time. If you want to get to know people around here, you want to start getting connected, where should I start? Sometimes you hop into one of our training events or environments, you're going to meet other people. But strangely enough, if you sit in that group for a little while, 12, 15 weeks sometimes, you'll realize it's not just about meeting other people. You actually are being trained relationally. That is our hope and our desire for you as we put you with other people, that actually you would grow in things like relational IQ. Emotional IQ. We want to help you understand your personalities, how you interact with other people in a room. We want you to learn how to manage expectations and deal with conflict in a healthy way. So that's what our training events and environments are about. We don't apologize for that. Yes, we want you to learn things, but we want to come alongside other people and understand and build better relationships. Specialized, seasonal, strategic. And for some of you, as you sit here today, this may be the right season for you to consider jumping into or checking out one of these events or environments. And we talk about them because we don't want you to miss out. We don't want you to miss out. We want to provide one way where you can come, learn, hear what we do, not just for our benefit, for yours. We want to help you take steps. Every week we talk about this, and Chris shared it even this morning. We have one clearinghouse for information when it comes to our events and environments. That's our events page online. And so if you go to our website, some of you are like, we have a website? This is crazy. You know, I'm going to start crying. No, we have a website, and it's got one page on there called the events page, and you can find what you need. I took a screen capture of my desktop just so you could see it. This is the homepage of our website if you've never been there. It is so simple. There's one large box that says events right in the middle on your mobile phone. It's like the third thing down. It just says events. Click there. Now, if you're an online savant and you're like, no, I want to see your, menu list and blah, 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 and drop downs, you can do that too. And guess what? Oh, there it is. So we've got events for you. And when you go online, that's where you can find all of that stuff, because we don't share that from stage just because it doesn't apply to all of you. But if you want to go on, you're like, man, I need to know the dates, the times, the locations. I want to know if you register. I want to know how much it costs. I want to know who it's for, age and stage. That's where you find all of that information. And so as we close today, I'm going to take the moment to tell you what we don't often do from stage. I'm going to tell you what is coming this fall. If you were to click on one of these tabs right now and you go to our events page, this is what you'll find. You'll find something called Woman Camp. And guess what? It is a training event for women. It's well named. So it's pretty obvious because it is specific to women. It is just an overnight. We call it an event. It is short term. It's a Friday night, all day Saturday. You leave town. It's about 30 minutes from here. An incredible opportunity. Yes, you'll get some content. You'll get some training and those kinds of things. But really, again, what you're going to get is an opportunity to come alongside other women, to be encouraged, to meet with them, talk about real life stuff, figure out what your next step is, and start to take some new ground in your faith. And women, we've been talking about this. You can go online and register today. Guess what? It's on our events page. We have something called Divorce Care. That is an environment, meaning it's going to meet on Mondays. It's 14 weeks long for this fall. We'll probably run it again in our winter semester. That's one that regularly rolls around in our semester model. Some of you, maybe right now or in your past, you've had to deal with this very, very challenging time of divorce in your life. Maybe you're at a stage right now where you're like, man, I need some healing. I need some support. I simply need some friendship around this. And I need to talk to someone and have some camaraderie. This would be a great training environment for you, or an opportunity to invite someone that you know. We do something this fall called Re-Engage. It is another training environment, and it's weeks long. It is Tuesdays, 16 weeks. It's all about helping you build or enhance your marriage. And so if you're sitting in the room today and you're married or you know someone is, and you may think, man, my marriage right now is a grease fire. Check out Reengage. See if it's right for you. You may sit here right now and be like, my marriage is I'm doing pretty good, doing okay. But I would like it to be stronger. I want it to remain strong. That's what this is for. It is for a full scope of people who are married. Again, you're going to come, be in a smaller group, get support one to another. And what it does is direct a husband and wife to each other in the establishing of their marriage. Check it out. Register. We've got another thing for younger couples this fall. It's called foundation groups. And I shouldn't say younger, newly married couples. And so this is specific from Reengage. And so if you are newly married, 3 years or less, we do something called foundation groups. And we pair up younger married couples with mentor couples, and this is a long environment. This environment may run 9 or 10 months, but it's a chance to train and build a solid foundation for your marriage as a newly married couple. Because it is such a commitment, though, and because it is so extensive, we want to make sure you know what it's about. And so this is just simply telling you there's an information meeting. And so you can come to that. It's just one night for an hour, and you'd be like, hey, I just want to see what these foundation groups are all about and if it's the right fit for me. So if that's you in the room, all you have to commit to is 1 hour. It's on our events page. You can sign up, and we'll see you there. Parents, we offer a lot of training for you. This is the last one I'm going to talk about. Parents, this is called Fearless Parenting. In particular, this fall, we're offering a class for those of you who have toddlers, because parenting toddlers is not hard or anything, right? 18 to 36 months old, but it's part of a greater process, parents. We've got this coming this fall, but maybe you've been around and you know this. When it comes to parenting, we've got a series of classes for parenting. Our winter semester starts in January. We run Parenting 101. Then in the fall, we run Parenting for Toddlers. And next fall, we'll run right on the back end of this, Parenting for Elementary Age. And so if you are younger parents, you realize I've got a 101 class, I've got a toddler class, and then I've got an elementary class. On top of that, we do something called milestone training, because we recognize that for parents, there are these kind of age and stage moments in the lives of kids that are so pivotal. Whether it's your kids making faith decisions, whether they're dealing with issues of purity, or kind of that rite of passage into young adulthood. Maybe you've got a high school student who's looking to graduate and is going to be leaving the home soon. All of these milestone moments, we don't provide environments for those. We have events. We have training events to help you as parents navigate those critical moments of life. Listen, there are a lot of things that we're doing. We don't always talk about them from stage because it's not for everybody in the room. It's specific. And it's seasonal. But right now, we want to kind of open up the curtain so you can see what we do. Is this everything we do? Are these all the training events and environments? No. But this is what we're doing as we launch this semester. Paul says, train yourself. Train yourself to be godly. Physical training is of some value, but godliness has value for all things. It holds promise for both the present life and the life to come. There are some principles that we can use that if we employed them in our spiritual journey, we would make ground. We would make ground. We would start to jump away from some of just the want-to moments of life, and we would start to make ground and actually do some things that are impactful. And so as you leave today, this is a question we ask all the time. What is your next step? And I think your process for all of you today would be to simply ask a question. Is there any area of life right now that God is maybe prompting you or asking you to grow in? And is it an area of life where you at some point in your time have said, yes, I'm going to do that, but you haven't yet done it? Or is it an area of life or an area of faith where you say, yeah, I started that, it hasn't gone well, but I need to try again? Maybe you need to step in with some greater intentionality. Maybe you need to step in and find some structure, find some help, find some accountability, find something that will hold you to task for a series of weeks so that you can truly build good habits and practices in your life that will help you move forward. The real question is, do you need to be trained? And if so, where? Where? Listen, at Fearless Church, we have a game plan. We have a game plan. And we recognize and we rightfully say, it's not the only plan, but it is our plan. And so last week we talked about being challenged, being inspired and being motivated. This week we're talking about being trained. But I encourage you, join us. Join us the next 2 weeks. Next week, we're going to tackle the third part of our game plan as we talk about what it really looks like to be community. So let me pray for you, and we'll wrap up today.